Hello. I thought I was in a rock-solid marriage until I stumbled upon the unsettling truth: my wife was slipping away for secret appointments with her dentist. But once I began unraveling her lies, I didn't just confront them, I tore apart their lives, exposing every layer of deceit, one piece of evidence at a time. My name's Alex, and I'm 36. My wife, Rebecca, is 34, and we've been married for 8 years. Ours wasn't the kind of relationship that ignited from the start, it was more like a slow-burning fire that gradually pulled us together. We met at a gathering hosted by a mutual friend, and I remember thinking, who's that woman captivating everyone with her laugh? I had no idea back then that she'd come to mean everything to me. Rebecca has this effortless charm, a magnetic pull that can light up a room. People used to say she could charm a stone, and frankly, they weren't wrong. I loved that about her, it felt like she could brighten the dullest day just by being there. Our marriage was solid, maybe even idyllic. We traveled, made plans for the future, and had started discussing kids. On the surface, we were the picture of happiness, and for a long time, I believed that too. But one thing life has a way of teaching you is that appearances can be dangerously deceptive. Looking back, I wonder if I should have noticed the changes sooner. Not the usual, always on her phone, type of red flags, but smaller things. Like how she started humming to herself while getting ready, a habit she'd never had. She would add a bit of makeup and twist in front of the mirror, even if she was just running a quick errand. Whenever I asked where she was headed, she'd answer with something vague, like, "Oh, just going out. I'll be back soon." It felt strange, but I brushed it off, thinking she just needed some space. Don't we all, sometimes? Then came the night of our anniversary. She was insistent about handling the dinner reservations herself. When we arrived at the restaurant, I caught a fleeting moment where the hostess handed her a small folded note. Rebecca laughed it off, crumpling the note and slipping it into her purse. "Oh, it's nothing," she said, waving my question away with a smile. I let it go, but now it's one of those nagging memories I can't shake. Rebecca had always been somewhat private, but recently her secrecy felt more calculated, like she was putting on an act. She'd make a point of telling me every little detail about her day, but her stories felt forced, like they were rehearsed lines. "Oh, I had lunch with Linda. She's thinking of switching jobs. And then I swung by the store for a few things," she'd say, her smile flawless as always. But there was something off. Why did she still have that faint scent of perfume lingering when she got home at 10 p.m.? I wish I could say I fully trusted her or that I was imagining things, but my gut told me otherwise. There's a difference between paranoia and instinct, and my instincts were screaming at me. Yet, I didn't want to be that overbearing, suspicious husband. So, I ignored it, convincing myself it was all in my head. Then there was the dentist. Yes, the guy who supposedly just handles routine checkups. Little did I know, that was where everything was about to unravel in ways I could never have foreseen. So, Rebecca's got this thing about her teeth, she always has. She brushes like 5 times a day, flosses meticulously, the whole 9 yards. Honestly, I used to find it pretty adorable. She'd complain if she even imagined there was plaque, and she never missed a dental appointment. But around 6 months back, she switched to a new dentist, Dr. Mark Evans. Apparently, one of her friends swore by him. Now, to put it in context, her old dentist was perfectly fine. No issues, no complaints, just clean teeth. But suddenly, she was raving about this new guy. "Dr. Evans is incredible. He's got such a thorough approach," she'd gush. "He uses these advanced techniques, it's amazing." At first, I thought, alright, she's enthusiastic about her new dentist. But soon, I noticed her bringing him up in conversations that had nothing to do with teeth. "Oh, Dr. Evans recommended this special toothpaste, it's fantastic for sensitivity," or, "Dr. Evans thinks I should come in for a follow-up soon, just to keep everything perfect." It reached a point where I jokingly called him Dr. Perfectionist one evening. She laughed, but there was this odd look in her eyes, like I'd hit on something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "He's just excellent at his job," she replied, a bit too defensively. I shrugged it off at the time, but it planted a seed of doubt. Then came that night. She strolled in past 11 p.m., and I'd been calling her for hours with no response. When she finally walked through the door, there was a strange, almost satisfied look on her face. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not missing a beat. "Dr. Evans squeezed me in last minute, my tooth was bugging me. You know how I am about that." She said it casually, like it was nothing unusual. But, who in their right mind sees a dentist at 10 p.m.? I kept my mouth shut, but as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a cold feeling of dread washed over me. Something was happening, but I didn't know what. Fast forward a week, and I'm parked outside his clinic, down the street, trying to convince myself I'm overreacting. But that little voice in my head keeps pressing me, saying, "You need to know." It won't let up. Finally, I get out of the car, walking toward the building, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and fear. I make my way around to a side window at the back. I know it's wrong, but I can't just sit there imagining the worst. I need answers. I peer through the window and see Rebecca leaning against the counter, laughing, a real laugh, one I haven't seen from her in months. I don't need to hear anything to get the message. She's smiling, relaxed, having the time of her life. Then, Dr. Evans steps close to her, far too close for comfort. He leans in, whispers something, and then, he kisses her. I don't even think. My mind goes blank, the anger taking control, and before I know it, I'm storming through the side door. I don't care if the whole world sees me. I slam the door open, and they jump apart, startled. What the hell is going on here? I shout, my voice echoing off the sterile white walls. Is this how you treat your patients, Dr. Evans? Rebecca's eyes go wide, and for a brief moment, she's frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. Her mouth opens, but no words come out. Dr. Evans just stands there, his face a mix of shock and confusion, as if he's wondering whether he should flee or attempt some kind of explanation. But I'm not about to give him the luxury of either option. Before I can even think, I lunge forward and shove him hard against the counter. You think this is funny? I roar, my voice cracking with raw fury. You think you can just mess around with someone else's wife and walk away like nothing happened? Whoa, man, calm down, Mark stammers, holding his hands up defensively. It's not what it looks like. I cut him off with a harder shove to his chest. Not what it looks like. I laugh, a twisted, angry laugh that even I don't recognize. I'm standing right here, watching it with my own eyes, and you're telling me it's not what it looks like. Finally snapping out of her shock, Rebecca steps between us, trying to push me back. Alex, please stop. You're overreacting, she pleads, her voice shaky, barely controlled. Overreacting? I bark, chest heaving. Overreacting to finding my wife wrapped around her dentist. Do you think I'm some kind of fool? The anger coursing through me feels unstoppable, the kind of fury I've never experienced before. So, is this what after-hours care looks like, Rebecca? Meeting him late at night for a special appointment? She flinches at the accusation, her eyes brimming with tears, but I feel no sympathy. Right now, all I want are answers. How long has this been going on? I demand, my gaze moving between the two of them. Was it a one-time thing, or are there months of lies I don't know about? Rebecca lowers her gaze to the floor, her lips trembling. I can practically feel my heart breaking, even as I stand there with clenched fists. Alex, please, let me explain, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I don't want your excuses, I snap, stepping back. I want the truth. Are you in love with him, or is he just your side fling? Mark tries to chime in, but I cut him off with a fierce glare. No, you keep quiet, I say, pointing a shaking finger at him. You're the last person I want to hear from right now. I trusted her, and you? You're nothing but a piece of garbage who thought he could take advantage. Rebecca finally lifts her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispers. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened. I feel the words hit me like a punch to the gut. It just happened. I repeat, each word dripping with disbelief. People don't just happen to have affairs. They don't just happen to sneak around and lie. You made a choice, Rebecca. You chose to betray me, and now you're standing here, acting like it was some sort of accident. She breaks down, sobbing, while I see Mark inching toward the door, like he's trying to make his escape. I move quickly to block his path. You're not going anywhere, I say, my voice dangerously calm. Not until I get some answers. Turning back to Rebecca, I see her wiping her tears with the back of her hand. How long? I ask again, my voice barely more than a whisper this time. How long has this been going on? She hesitates, and I can see the words forming on her lips, but she's too terrified to say them. Finally, she whispers, a few months. Hearing it feels like the ground is falling out from under me. A few months. I repeat, numb. All this time, and not once did you think I deserved the truth. I was going to tell you, I swear, she says, her voice cracking. I didn't know how. I shake my head, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. Didn't know how. Here's a suggestion, Rebecca, try starting with, Alex, I'm cheating on you. That seems pretty straightforward to me. Mark finally finds his voice, though it's trembling. Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go this way. I silence him with a glare. No, you don't get to say you're sorry. You don't get to act like you're some innocent bystander in all this. You knew she was married. You knew exactly what you were doing. He falters, visibly searching for words that could somehow make this right, but there's nothing he could say that would change any of it. I turn my focus back to Rebecca, and suddenly, the blinding anger melts into something darker, a profound, overwhelming sadness. Was it worth it? I ask, my voice hollow and drained. Was he worth throwing everything we had away? She doesn't respond, but her guilty eyes say more than words ever could. It's too late for anything she could say now. Without waiting for an answer, I turn and walk out of the room, leaving them both standing there, stunned and silent. The cold night air hits me as I step outside, and for the first time, I feel like I can actually breathe again. My anger starts to dissipate, replaced by a heavy emptiness I've never felt before. I have no idea what comes next, but one thing is certain, my life has just changed in a way I can't reverse. After that night, everything seemed surreal, as though I were watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. I couldn't decide if I was furious, heartbroken, or simply numb. Confronting them should have brought some kind of closure, but instead, it unleashed a torrent of unanswered questions. The image of Rebecca's face, tear-streaked and remorseful, replayed in my mind over and over. But sorry was never going to be enough. If this was going to be the end of my marriage, then I'd make sure it ended on my terms. I wasn't about to let her walk away without owning up to everything she'd done. So, I did what anyone desperate for the truth would do, I started digging. I didn't just want my suspicions, I wanted undeniable proof, something to expose Rebecca and this self-satisfied Mark for the liars they were. I combed through Rebecca's phone records, scoured her calendar, even checked her GPS location history. Stalking? Maybe, but I didn't care about appearances anymore. What I uncovered was a clear pattern, late-night appointments that always lined up with the times I was at work or away. And then there were the text messages, ones she thought she'd deleted, but I managed to recover fragments. They were enough to confirm this wasn't some brief fling, it had been happening for months. But still, it wasn't the undeniable proof I wanted. I needed her to face the consequences, to see there was no escape. Then, out of nowhere, a break came. A few days later, I received a message on social media from someone named Lisa. Her name didn't ring a bell until she introduced herself, Mark's dental assistant. My heart raced. I didn't know her intentions, but I had a feeling she held the missing pieces I was looking for. Lisa's message was straightforward. She'd heard rumors about what happened that night, about the confrontation. Apparently, word spread fast in their small dental world. But she wasn't reaching out to offer sympathy. No, Lisa had her own reasons to talk to me. She'd been harboring feelings for Mark for years, hoping he'd eventually notice her. She'd been the ever-dedicated assistant, always going the extra mile to make his life easier, only for him to treat her like part of the scenery. That was, until Rebecca came along. Mark had been toying with Lisa for ages, giving her just enough attention to keep her interested, only to drop her when someone new came along. When Rebecca began showing up at his office, everything shifted. He became captivated by her, and Lisa was unceremoniously cast aside. When she confronted him, he brushed her off, dismissing her concerns as pointless drama he didn't have time for. That rejection twisted her affection into something else entirely, a relentless, blazing hatred. "I can't stand him," she messaged me. "And I can't stand your wife either. They deserve every ounce of what's coming to them." I didn't know what to expect from Lisa, but I could tell she wasn't playing games. She was angry, deeply hurt, and now driven by a desire for revenge. Then came her bombshell. "I have something you might want to see. I've been keeping tabs on them, just in case. Trust me, you'll want to see this." A file appeared in my inbox, and as it downloaded, I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. When it finally finished, my hands shook as I hovered over the play button, steeling myself before pressing it. For a few moments, there was just silence and darkness. And then the screen came to life, and there they were, Rebecca and Mark, in his clinic, after hours. They looked relaxed, almost too comfortable in each other's presence. Mark was seated on one of the dental chairs, and Rebecca was straddling him, wrapped in nothing more than a thin, barely there gown. The scene unfolding before me felt unreal, like something out of a twisted, low-budget movie. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Their laughter filled the room, their whispers close, sharing things I wish I could unhear. But that was only the beginning. As the video continued, it got worse, so much worse. Mark wasn't just indulging in some sordid affair, he was orchestrating it, recording every move, giving instructions as if he were directing a performance. Rebecca followed along, laughing, smiling, fully invested in every moment. They were doing things I'd never even thought of with her, things she'd never once suggested during our time together. Then came the part that truly made me feel ill. There he was, with her in every possible way, every degrading detail captured like a twisted trophy. Rebecca didn't look like a woman caught up in something beyond her control, she looked perfectly at home, like she belonged right there with him. I felt my legs go weak. I had to sit down, yet I couldn't look away. It was a car wreck in slow motion. I wanted to stop watching, but I couldn't. I felt humiliated, disgusted, but most of all, a fury so intense it took everything in me not to lash out at the screen. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd done it brazenly, carelessly, as if I'd never mattered. Then another message from Lisa popped up. "I've got more if you want it," she wrote, almost with a hint of dark humor. Videos, pictures, texts. He wasn't very careful. "I can help you make sure they're exposed, Alex. I can make sure everyone sees them for what they really are." I paused, struggling to catch my breath, trying to get my mind back under control. It felt like my whole world was spinning, and I had to hold on to something solid to keep from being swallowed by it all. But there was one thing I knew for certain, Rebecca was not going to walk away from this unscathed. I didn't know if I'd be able to use the video, or if I could even bring myself to watch it again. But one thing was clear, I needed a plan. Lisa was offering me everything I needed to destroy their reputations, to drag them down the way they'd done to me. Yet, I realized that if I wasn't cautious, I could end up wrecking myself in the process. I typed out my reply to Lisa, trying to keep my hand steady. "Send me everything you have." "Gladly," she replied, almost too eagerly. "Let's make them pay." Once I committed to this, I knew there was no going back. The evidence Lisa had provided was damning, there was no way Mark or Rebecca could escape the fallout. After consulting with a lawyer, we decided to press charges against Mark, not just for infidelity but for unethical conduct and abuse of power within his workplace. His actions went beyond betrayal, they were violations of professional ethics, crossing legal boundaries by engaging in intimate acts with a patient on company property. The case quickly gained traction. The legal team subpoenaed Mark's records, and with the videos, photos, and texts Lisa had compiled, we had a case that was airtight. For me, this was about more than just revenge or a divorce. I wanted everyone to see Mark for who he truly was. And if Rebecca ended up facing the same judgment, so be it. The trial became the talk of the town. Mark had always cultivated this image of a charming, respectable dentist, but now, the facade was shattered. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed, people whispered, speculated, and stole glances at Rebecca and Mark as they walked in. I could see the strain in their faces, the way they tried to keep their composure, but the cracks were already starting to show. I sat next to Lisa, who shot me a small, triumphant smile. "Ready?" she asked, her voice laced with satisfaction. "Oh, I'm ready," I replied. And I meant every word. The prosecution went all in, presenting the evidence from the start, texts showing Mark arranging late-night appointments for Rebecca, disguised as dental checkups. Then came the videos, the same ones Lisa had shown me. The defense tried to argue that the footage was irrelevant, but the judge allowed it, pointing out the blatant abuse of professional boundaries. The room fell dead silent as the first video began to play, you could hear a pin drop. There they were, Mark and Rebecca, in his clinic after hours, engaged in things that had nothing to do with dentistry. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered phrase was on display. I watched as Rebecca's face flushed red with shame, her eyes darting around, desperately searching for somewhere, anywhere, to hide. But there was nowhere to go. She had to sit there, just a few feet away from her family, her friends, and even some of our mutual acquaintances, while her betrayal played out on the screen. Mark tried to keep a calm facade, but his hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "Look at them. They thought they were so clever, hiding it from everyone." I didn't respond, but I felt a chilling sense of satisfaction settle over me. This was their reality now. No hiding, no escape, they were forced to confront the ugly truth of their actions, and it was all on display for everyone to witness. The trial continued for several days, with witness testimonies, expert opinions, and a relentless stream of damning evidence. But the moment that truly shifted the course of the case came when a representative from the state licensing board took the stand. They outlined the numerous ethical codes Mark had violated, not just because of the affair, but because he exploited his position of authority to initiate an inappropriate relationship with a patient. Mark attempted to defend himself, claiming everything was consensual, but the board was having none of it. They reached a swift decision: Mark would be stripped of his medical license, effective immediately. The judge's gavel came down, and with that single motion, Dr. Perfect was no more. Murmurs filled the courtroom, but my focus stayed fixed on Mark. I saw the realization hit him, his entire career, the life he'd built, gone in an instant. He tried to maintain his composure, but his eyes turned glassy, betraying just how shattered he was. Lisa nudged me, a satisfied smirk on her face. "There it is. That's the look I've been waiting for." Watching Mark's facade crumble was satisfying, but seeing Rebecca writhe under the scrutiny was something else entirely. Throughout the trial, she'd kept her head down, as if she could somehow disappear from this nightmare. But once those videos played, there was no escape. Every gasp, every whispered reaction in the audience felt like a slap to her. I could see her cheeks burn red, her hands trembling as she avoided everyone's gaze, knowing exactly what they were all thinking. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered all the lies she'd fed me, all the nights she'd slipped away, convinced she could carry on behind my back without consequence. At one point, the prosecutor turned to her and asked, "Mrs. Taylor, could you explain why you felt it necessary to see your dentist after regular business hours?" Rebecca stammered, her words faltering, and for a second, she glanced over at me, her eyes pleading, as if I could somehow make it all stop. I met her gaze, unwavering. She was on her own. The judge captured it best during the final statement. "This case has revealed a disturbing pattern of calculated misconduct. This was no momentary lapse but a willful act that violated both professional ethics and personal trust." As the court adjourned, a wave of relief washed over me. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I looked at Lisa, and she grinned, her satisfaction unmasked. "We did it," she said. "We really did it." I nodded, feeling a complicated mix of emotions, triumph, relief, but also a hollow sense of loss. Sure, I'd won, but it didn't feel like a victory. I had lost so much, my marriage, my faith and trust, the future I'd thought I was building. But at least I was in control of how it ended. As Rebecca tried to make her way out of the courtroom, I caught one last glimpse of her, head down, hands shaking as whispers and pointed glances followed her every step. She quickened her pace, but it was like the eyes of everyone in that room were glued to her, watching her every move. Turning to Lisa, I asked, "So, what now?" She shrugged. "Now, we move forward. But at least they're not walking away from this without facing the consequences. It's been a few weeks since the trial wrapped up, and I still feel a bit lost, unsure where to go from here." I filed for divorce, of course, and Rebecca didn't even try to contest it. I think she just wanted to disappear, to leave the mess she'd created behind. From what I've heard, Mark is leaving town too. He's got no practice, no career, no reputation. I can't say I feel triumphant, but I do feel free. I'm no longer shackled by the constant lies, no longer waking up wondering what secrets are hidden from me. It's a strange feeling, this newfound freedom, and it's going to take time to adjust. But if there's one lesson I've learned from all this, it's to never ignore my instincts. When someone betrays your trust, they should be ready to deal with the fallout, however painful. Sometimes, you have to burn everything down to have a chance at rebuilding. As for Lisa, we've kept in touch. Maybe it's just a friendship born out of shared anger, or maybe it's something deeper. For now, it feels good to have someone who truly understands, who stood by my side and helped me see this through to the bitter end. I don't know what the future holds, but at least now, I know who I can rely on. And that's more than I had before. After the trial, things didn't just wrap up for Rebecca and Mark, they completely unraveled. Mark might have lost his license, but he wasn't planning to go quietly. Rumors started circulating that he blamed everything on Rebecca, calling her a distraction and claiming their affair had cost him his career. He cast himself as the victim, insisting she was the one who had pursued him, leading him astray. It was a flimsy excuse, but I suppose when you're desperate to save face, you'll say anything. Word got back to me that they had one last ugly fight, where Mark outright accused her. "This is your fault. If you hadn't pushed for this, if you hadn't complicated everything, I'd still have my career." From what I gathered, Rebecca didn't have much to say in return. Maybe she was stunned that he turned on her so easily, or maybe deep down, she'd known it was only a matter of time. The last time I saw Mark, he was slipping out of town with his tail between his legs. His reputation was ruined, and no one wanted anything to do with him. I can't say I felt any sympathy, he'd dug his own grave. Rebecca, though, she was left to deal with the wreckage of her life, and it was like watching a slow-motion disaster. She moved out of our house, and for me, that felt like the closure I needed. It was like shutting a door, finally allowing me to start fresh without daily reminders of what had happened. I heard she's staying in a cramped apartment across town, barely scraping by. Mark was gone, and none of the friends she once charmed wanted to be associated with her after the truth came out. Overnight, she went from the life of the party to someone everyone avoided. When she tried to date again, it wasn't anything like her romance with Mark. From what I heard, she ended up with a string of men who, let's say, didn't quite measure up. A few were notorious freeloaders, men who couldn't keep a job or take care of themselves. I remember hearing about one guy who moved in with her and freeloaded until she finally got tired of him and kicked him out. It was a far cry from the polished, successful professional she'd imagined she was getting with Mark. I'll admit, part of me found satisfaction in seeing her struggle. Maybe it's petty, but after everything she put me through, it felt like she deserved to experience the consequences. She'd been so willing to sneak around and lie, thinking she could trade me for something better, and now she was left with people who couldn't care less about her. While Rebecca was stuck trying to make sense of the mess she created, I finally felt free to start rebuilding. Filing for divorce and leaving the trial behind me felt like a massive weight lifting from my shoulders. There were still loose ends to handle, but I was learning to breathe again, to imagine a future free from deception and betrayal. One person who made that journey a lot easier was Lisa. We kept in touch after the trial, partly because of the shared satisfaction of seeing Mark and Rebecca face justice. But as time passed, we discovered that we got along exceptionally well. We started meeting up for coffee, then dinner, and eventually spending weekends together. What began as a connection rooted in shared resentment blossomed into something far more genuine. Lisa had been through her own share of turmoil with Mark, and she knew exactly what it was like to be deceived, to be made a fool of. But she was resilient and refused to let it break her. She could laugh at it, make light of it, and find ways to look ahead instead of dwelling on the past. That strength was something I hadn't realized I needed until she showed me. One evening after dinner, she looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You know, I don't think I've ever seen you smile this much." I hadn't really noticed, but she was right. "Guess I haven't had much reason to smile," I replied. Her face softened with a playful spark in her eyes. "Well, get used to it. You deserve to be happy, Alex, and not just because you finally got the last word." We began spending more time together, and it didn't take long for me to realize that my feelings for Lisa were deeper than a simple rebound. She was warm, intelligent, and had this way of making me feel truly seen, like I was more than just the guy who'd been betrayed. She'd been there when everything in my life fell apart, and now, she was helping me piece it back together. One weekend, we decided to escape the city for a while, taking a simple trip to a small cabin by the lake. It was nothing extravagant, just a few days in a quiet place with no distractions, no reminders of the past. We spent our days hiking, talking, and soaking in the peace of being somewhere untouched by all the chaos we'd left behind. On our last evening, we sat by the water, gazing at the stars. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Lisa looked over at me, her face soft and bathed in moonlight, and asked, "So, what happens now?" I took a moment, then reached for her hand. "I think we just keep moving forward," I said, "together." And that was it. No drama, no hidden motives, just two people choosing to see where life might take them. It was simple, and that's what made it so perfect. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let the past keep dragging me down. I was done with deceit, with manipulation, and with people who didn't care about anyone but themselves. As for Rebecca, I don't keep track of her anymore. From what I hear, she's still trying to figure out her own life, still searching for something to fill the emptiness Mark left behind. Maybe she'll find it, or maybe she'll keep chasing after something that makes her feel special. But that's no longer my concern. I have my own life to live, and for the first time in a long while, I feel like it's truly mine. And the best part? I'm not going through it alone. Goodbye.